I'm very privileged and we're very happy to host this event. We believe deeply in the things that are going to be presented here today, and so we're very happy to help our community. My name is Dan Wolven. I'm the pastor. If there is anything that you may need while you're here, short of $10,000, just see me. I'll be wandering back and forth. Just so you can know beforehand, we do have one restroom in the back. That window right there is the room where the one restroom is. There are our main restrooms are in this wing down the stairs where you came in, and there's other restrooms. They need to be remodeled, but they're very clean. Down the basement, if you went out the back door and then went down the steps, they'd be right there at the bottom of the steps. So we are delighted that you're here. We are thankful that you have come, and we appreciate those that are here. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jack Windsor, and he will go ahead and moderate the meeting. Thank you again.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Ohio Education Forum with a focus on social emotional learning. When John and Diane Stover called and asked the Ohio Press Network to be here today, I immediately said yes. And I did that because the Ohio Press Network is on a mission to uncover the truth in state government, whether that's state house all the way down to political subdivisions known as school districts and everywhere in between. We are committed to delivering the truth through fact-based news and reporting, whether that be through online news reports or community news events like the one here today. Our goal is to give you an accurate picture in our government, the policies, people, and politics that affect your everyday living. The purpose of a free press is to allow intellectual and political liberty to thrive, and you cannot have a free republic without all three. Why did I choose to be here on behalf of the Ohio Press Network? I chose to represent the Ohio Press Network today because 9 years ago, when the doctor held up a baby girl, my life forever changed. Being a parent is the most important role I play. Our kids are the legacies that we leave our world after we're physically gone. What we leave them isn't as important as how we leave them. Their intelligence, their character, and their conscience. Someone much, much smarter than me said, the test of every religious, political, or educational system is the woman and man it forms. If a system injures the intelligence, it is bad. If it injures the character, it is vicious. If it injures the conscience, it is criminal. Interestingly, here we are today in a church discussing political choices related to our education system. America began as an experiment in being governed by reason and truth. For the trial to continue, we must be reasonable, able to entertain opposing viewpoints without embracing them, and living with civility in the tension between those two opposites. It also requires seeking and finding the truth, acknowledging it even when it may be in a different place than where we currently stand, or a reality quite different than that for which we have fought up to now. The truth in the matter of our kids, their intelligence, their character, and their conscience matters. In my book, it matters more than anything. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. And that's why you're here. And that's why our panelists, the advocates and the members of the boards of education, are here today to share with you as well. And what they have to say is way more important than anything else I can add. So a couple of things. One, we'll hear from key speakers, and during those talks, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Dan will circulate a note card. You can write your question down and submit it, and we'll ask each of the speakers at the end of their talk to answer those questions. We'll also have two panels. One of those panels will consist of, as I mentioned, advocates, and the second panel will consist of members of boards of education, and then we'll wrap up. Our first set of speakers, John and Diane Stover. John Stover is the president of Ohio Value Voters, an organization founded by he and his wife Diane in 2007 that stands for life and family values. Diane Stover serves as the program director of the Protect Ohio Children Coalition to Stop Indoctrination in Schools and is co-chair of the National Protect Child Health Coalition since 2017. And I believe that Diana Stover will talk with you first. Diane, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. I have no idea why I am in this whole movement of finding all of this terrible material that's in our schools, but God called me. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I am not afraid, and I am not ashamed. The Protect Ohio Children Coalition is now in our 5th year of collecting evidence of indoctrination in Ohio schools through open records requests, tips, and whistleblower information. The evidence about comprehensive sex education, critical race theory, and social-emotional learning from nearly 100 school districts can be found on our website, protectohiochildren.net. On your chair, you have a flyer with the 15 harmful elements of social-emotional learning and our Protect Ohio Children postcard with information about our organization and website. Please visit our website, our YouTube channel, and our private Facebook groups for the North, Central, and South regions. Social-emotional learning is really more insidious than critical race theory because the Ohio Department of Education has made the whole child framework of social-emotional learning part of their strategic plan that includes CSE and CRT and gender confusion. Last week, our governor announced $26 million for school-based health centers and announced the dozen-plus school districts equipped with social workers and healthcare workers on site. When you make SEL, that dismantles strong bonds between parents and children, a key objective, and then snap that together with a school-based health clinic, what could possibly go wrong? Planned Parenthood and their many allies have a perfect setup to bring in radical, communist-style propaganda and brainwashing through SEL curriculum. This is not local control, as it was intended. This is control from the left and the teachers' unions. In Northern Ohio, the Northeast Ohio Diversity Center has contracted most of Cuyahoga County school districts with full-time consultants. Here is the teacher training from a whistleblower that parents are not going to know about unless they see it on our website. This training is called Sexuality and Gender Acceptance. SAGA is the acronym. There's always an acronym for everything. An LGBTQIA plus workshop for schools. Please study the 15 harmful elements that are in that handout sheet. School teachers and staff are actually telling students not to tell their parents about certain topics of SEL and SAGA. Through data collection surveys like Panorama, the schools are asking personal questions and tracking and running reports on students by their social security numbers and student IDs. We have actual screenshots of second step SEL curriculum that has links to websites that show how to get a medically induced abortion. The very foundations of the family are being deconstructed and destroyed by schools. The government is becoming the parent. Parental authority and parental rights are in jeopardy. Ohio is supposed to be a local control state, but indoctrination is not coming from the community or the parents. It's coming from outside radicals who have a dangerous agenda for our schools. When schools take steps to bring indoctrination into the classrooms, we are here to shine light on the darkness of dangerous and radical materials being presented to children across the state of Ohio. We urge taxpayers and parents to form local community groups to hold school officials accountable. Thank you.
My name is John Stover, and just a few things. Let me just thank you for being here this morning. There's a number of other places you could be, but you certainly feel, as all of us do, that this is extremely important right, when it comes to our children. You know, I'd like to, first of all, thank Pastor Dan Wolven for opening up his church for this event. Also, Jack, thank you for being here as well, Ohio Press Network. You know, I tell you, if we had reporters like Jack Windsor, we wouldn't have the problems we do with the news media today. And then I wanted to, before I get into what I have to say, I just wanted to recognize one other individual who's on our board of Ohio Value Voters, Jim Kurg. Raise your hand. Jim, thank you for being here. Ohio Value Voters calls on the Ohio State Board of Education to immediately rescind their strategic plan that includes social emotional learning, known as SEL, as one of their 4 learning domains. Based on evidence provided by the Protect Ohio Children Coalition, and the education system is putting families in danger by promoting whole child SEL frameworks and programs. Protect Ohio Children Coalition has obtained numerous anonymous tips that reveal massive data collection and overreach in Ohio classrooms. Here are just a few of the problems we find with social emotional learning. Undermines parental rights, may instruct children they have rights to confidentiality and privacy from their parents, and not tell their parents what they are being taught about in school. Promotes data collection. Government databases are collecting data on students, and parents have not consented to this data collection of private information. Impersonates mental health services. Many SEL programs are designed to shape the child's development and brain to accept particular worldviews regarding sexuality, racial attitudes, and other social issues under the guise of providing a mental health benefit. Also promotes activism, allegiance, and division. Social emotional learning is promoted as the lever for equity and social justice. Critical race theory and Marxist lessons are taught regarding oppression, oppressors, oppression, intersexuality, race, gender, and religion in ways that promote illegal, sectarian concepts. Community organizing events and after-school programs are routinely promoted. You know, unfortunately, what we see many, many times is that parents are not aware of what their children are being taught. They have no idea what their child are being taught in the classroom. Just to add, outside of the notes that I have here, you know, I know a couple of years ago, whenever they started locking things down because of COVID, there were a few school districts that they started talking among themselves. What are we going to do? Parents now are going to see what we're teaching their children because they're learning from home. One school district and superintendent came up with the idea, I know what we'll do. We'll have the parents sign a consent form and decree that they will not look over the shoulder of their child as we're conducting class. This is how far some of the teaching has gone in our schools today. One of the things that we can do, we can take action. Contact the Ohio State Board of Education and the members, and we have a few here today. The few that we have, I'm telling you what, they are doing a great job for us, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from them a little bit later. Contact the Ohio State Board of Education members and ask them to immediately rescind the Ohio Department of Education strategic plan that includes social emotional learning. Thank you.
Diane, I want to apologize. I think I said Diana, and I do apologize. I was thinking maybe of Diana Fessler. So I do apologize, Diane. And John, thank you. And at first I thought, did I hear that correctly when you said that schools are asking our children not to tell parents what they are learning? I don't know if you caught that, but John Stover said the same thing. That's alarming to me. All right, our next speaker, Lisa Chaffee, is president of the Hilliard Republican Club and state director of Parents' Rights and Education. Lisa became aware of the problems in our schools with CRT, SEL, critical race theory, social emotional learning, and the lack of focus on academics. She ran for school board. It says unsuccessfully. I'm going to say you just came up short, because I'm sure that there was a lot of success had in that entire operation. But is still working to ensure that our children are receiving an education based on the principles of democracy and equality. I didn't say equity, I said equality, without the ideology. Please welcome Lisa Chaffee.
Good afternoon, and I also want to reiterate, thank Jack for being here, and I thank all of you for giving your time. It's very inspiring to know that those of us who are doing this on the front lines like this right now are not alone, and we have support in you. As Jack said, I am director of the Ohio chapter of Parents' Rights in Education. We are in our infancy, so I don't have as much experience as Miss Diane does, but we're getting there. So what I want to share with you is, I got to tell you, we are in a war. We are in an ideological war with the left. This war actually began 100 years ago when the National Teachers Union was formed. Their whole ideology is Marxism. And they have imbued that in our curriculum, in our schools. They actually believe that only 1/4 of the school day should be devoted to academics, and the rest should be devoted to creating social justice warriors. And by default, Democratic voters. And it's sad. It's really sad that we have to be having these discussions. Honestly, that's the one good thing that came out of COVID, is it peeled back that curtain. Prior to COVID, I was just a mom, taking care of my son. I'm a single mom, coaching baseball, working. And when the lockdown happened, I started paying more attention to what the school board was doing. I had no idea what the school board did, that you could even vote for the school board. A few months later, I'm running for school board. It was a scary thought. It was not unsuccessful in the fact that I didn't get on the board. I ran with two wonderful fellow conservatives, Beth Murdoch and Zach Borson-Hilliard, and they won. They're on the board. And we are still working with them to help get our school back to focusing on academics. But we are behind the 8 ball here. As I said, this war started 100 years ago. And the one thing I hope you ask yourselves when you leave today, because you're getting a lot of information, and after you listen to what Jennifer McWilliams has to say, your jaws are going to hit the floor. I hope you ask yourself, what can I do to help? And there's a lot of things that you can do. Figure out what within your universe, even if it's just sending an email to your state representative, emailing the State Board of Education, talking to your friends. The most important thing you can do is educate yourself, like we're doing today. On your chairs, there's also a flyer with a Q code. If you scan that, that will take you to a landing page that has Parents' Rights website, Protect Ohio Children's website. You can join. There's other groups that you can join. We have representation from Moms for Liberty here today. They are also fighting this battle with us. There's many organizations out there that you can join. And even just sharing information that you get, with just one person, that helps spread the news and is waking people up. Get involved in your local district. Go to your school board meetings. Talk to your school board members. Find out where they stand. Coalesce with similar-minded parents. Let them know you're not going to tolerate this. And in case you didn't know, you can even testify at the State Board of Education. They meet monthly. There's no requirements. You just have to let them know you're coming. And go talk to them and let them know how you feel. And that's what we're trying to do right now. This is our launch pad. We want the State Department of Education to remove social emotional learning from the strategic plan. It has got to go. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a tough battle. I'm tired. I've been fighting this battle for the last year now. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs. I'm director of Ohio Parents' Rights, president of the Hilliard Republican Club, and I'm still out here fighting. And I'm not going to stop. And it invigorates me to see all of you here. And there's people at home watching us online right now. There's power in numbers. And we can do this together. We just have to stick together and support each other. Our kids and our country are worth this fight. Thank you for being here, and thank all of you panelists who are joining us, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Lisa, thank you. And you're right, 2020 taught us a lot. It was a year of clear vision. We saw things that we never imagined were going on, and I think it's quite inspiring to think about your story, that you went from not being sure about what was going on with the school board to running. So kudos to you, and thank you for sharing. In 2019, Jennifer was working as a reading intervention instructor when she became very concerned about the education transformation unfolding at her school and across our nation. As she began to research what was causing the shift in focus from academics to ideology, she learned about the driving force behind the change, social emotional learning. During that time, most people were not familiar with SEL or the indoctrinating agenda behind it. In September 2019, she started an organization to inform parents and citizens about the concerning changes in the education system. Jennifer began sounding the alarm on SEL. In February 2020, Jennifer was fired for exposing the SEL program at her school. She now has a federal First Amendment case to defend her right to free speech. Today, she is your keynote speaker. Welcome, Jennifer McWilliams. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to get right into it. We have about 45 minutes, and social emotional learning is a very complicated topic, and that's why it's taken a while for people to start to realize something is wrong and that SEL may have something to do with it. So he told you a little bit about my story, so I'm not going to, this isn't about me, but I do want to, if there's anybody that's here that may be a teacher or you know a teacher, I want to give people hope. We still live in America. We have a First Amendment right. And they fired me from my school for posting something on social media in my own personal time. I was not at work. What I posted was the truth. And I went in, I did that on a Monday and on a Friday, and it was actually just an article that I did not write that I posted. And so that was on a Monday, and on Friday I went in and they fired me for it. I immediately pulled my daughter, who was attending school, she was in first grade, out of that school, and we walked out of there, and I knew right then this was something much bigger than I realized at the time. And so I just want to give teachers hope because, like I said, or he said, I do have a federal First Amendment case that will set precedents for teachers to speak out. I'm going to win it, and I'm going to encourage teachers to do the same when I do. So we're going to jump right into it. I like to give this visual here. It's not very fancy. I'm not a graphic designer, but I want people to understand, if you are watching anything in education right now, there are all of these problems coming out of it. Of course, critical race theory is absolutely an issue. The gender ideology, the books with obscenity in our libraries at the schools are an issue, and I want everyone to understand that this is all pouring or coming in under the umbrella of social emotional learning. Social emotional learning started to really take hold about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, but it's taken a while to transform the system, And so that's why people are really starting to see it now, and then of course COVID helped expose it as well. So very quickly, I know everybody has been just about beat over the head with CRT, but this presentation, if you don't have a little bit of an understanding of what that is, it will not be as relevant to you. So one thing is, has anybody here went to their school board or their administrators and said, are you teaching critical race theory? And they say, no, of course not, right? That's only in the universities. I'm gonna help you out because I'm gonna show you how they are. But one thing that you will hear proponents of SEL say, they will say that CRT is just teaching real history, okay? That is not true. Critical race theory, they use what's called revisionist history. CRT suggests that American history be closely scrutinized and reinterpreted as opposed to being accepted as at face value and truth, reinterpreted through a lens of oppression. Okay? So a lot of what you hear with social emotional learning, they will talk about the lens of the children, the lens that we see things, the perception. And what they are doing is they are pushing it through this lens of oppression, or I would call it a critical race theorist lens, and how they want you to view things so that your perception of our world and our country are different. They use, so everything that they do is very subjective. CRT rejects objectivity and replaces truth with naming one's reality. Okay, this is also called, it's one of the tenets of critical race theory called counter-storytelling. They will uphold stories, individual stories, that are focused on how that individual was oppressed, in what way by the system. And they will use that to tell the history. No matter if that actually shaped the actual history of our country and where we stand today. Everybody understands there's individual situations. We all have individual situations. But they want to select the perceptions that they use to teach your children that America is systemically racist. And out of this, you get things like the 1619 Project, which claims that the American Revolution was motivated in large part to ensure slavery would continue, which is absolutely false. So they are shaping our history. It's not teaching real history, it's shaping it through the perceptions that they choose. That's very important because in social emotional learning, you will hear them talk about kids being responsible for their own education, having a voice. And that is what they're talking about, because they're going to take children and they're going to teach them that they're oppressed in some way. They're going to uphold those stories, and they're going to manipulate the children to believe that that is all because of our country. Okay. Critical race theory, it does not just focus on race. It also includes intersectionality, especially in K through 12. So what a critical race theorist believes is that we all have an identity in each of these sections, so based on this identity wheel. So you have race, gender, sexual orientation, documented, undocumented, religion, ability status, socioeconomic status, country of origin, age, education, language, and geographic location. And based on each one of us and what our identities are within those categories, they believe that we all fall, and how they overlap, on a hierarchy in this country of oppressed and oppressors. And they believe that it is because the country is systemically racist, or I like to say oppressive, so that people understand it is not only and solely due, they are not just blaming race. And they will tell you that we need to dismantle the inequitable systems. But people need to understand that critical race theorists believe that every system in our country is inequitable. They are trying to tear down this country. And I will tell you, if you are white and male, you are the dominant culture, you are the oppressor, you're at the top of that hierarchy. And it goes from there. So that's important to understand for this presentation and what is happening with SEL in our schools. Social emotional learning comes from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And CASEL, when they first came on the scene, the definition of social emotional learning was an integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals. Feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. It's a lot of word salad there. So that is what they came up with for the definition of social emotional learning. In December of 2020, they decided to update it. So one point I want to make about social emotional learning, it is ill-defined. They get to continue to move the goalposts until they get it to where they want. This is not 2 + 2 = 4. Our education system has transformed our education around something that is now controlled by very powerful globalist elitists that get to change the definition of what they're teaching your children when they want to. So in the update, they added that SEL advances educational equity. Equity is one of those CRT words, and excellence through authentic school, family, community partnerships to establish learning environments and experiences that feature trusting and collaborative relationships. Collaborative relationships is also a key word there. Rigorous and meaningful curriculum and instruction and ongoing evaluation. SEL can help address various forms of inequity. There's your dismantle the inequitable systems and empower young people and adults to co-create thriving schools and contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities. What I like to tell people is in this SEL stuff, they make everything sound really nice, but you have to understand and you pay attention to what they're telling you. They're telling you what they're going to do, but they just make it sound nice, right? Okay. So CASEL is really the pinnacle of what's going on with this SEL. They control the definition, they control the skills that the children are supposed to learn through these programs. But the schools actually, what they do is adopt a SEL program. Usually. There are some schools that will just go by the state, whatever the state is putting out. But they will all follow CASEL's guidelines. So some of the programs is Leader in Me, that was the one that was at my school, Second Steps, Mind Up for Life, Conscious Discipline, Paths, Tools of the Mind, and the Michigan Model for Health. However, there are many SEL programs. I don't focus so much on one specific program, although I will give some examples. But the reason I don't do that is because all of the SEL programs, I think there's a couple out there now that don't do this, and they're trying, it's people trying to come up with the new SEL. The whole thing has to go. No SEL programs, they should not be doing this to children. But most of them follow CASEL's guidelines. So I really don't focus on these specific programs. So if these programs that I have listed are not at your school, find out what is. If you dig into the website of that program, I will about guarantee that it follows CASEL's framework. And this is the framework. So this framework is a critical race theory framework, and I'm going to explain that to you. This is the framework that all of the SEL programs go by. These are the competencies or skills that they say they have to teach your children. The reason they say they have to do that is because the parents are no longer equipped to do it themselves. If you talk to a teacher who's on a rampage about this, about the pushback on SEL, they'll tell you, well, what am I supposed to do about the kids that are in my classroom that can't behave? Or what do I do about the kids that come from homes and don't have everything that they need? Well, first of all, when people attack or come at you with statements like that, it's in our nature to immediately be like, well, I don't mean anything against those kids, because we don't, right? Like everybody in here realizes that those situations exist. But now that doesn't mean that one child shops at one place and another child gets to shop at another, and that, well, that's not what that's not what it is. If there's a true situation of neglect, if there's a true situation of a child that is not getting the food or what they need, Our schools have always had programs to take care of that. Always. So don't let those teachers, we've always had interventions for kids that have behavior problems. We had interventions before SEL for children that didn't get help at home academically and were behind. We had interventions for all of those things. I have worked in many schools. I've never seen a single child come to school with that's been neglected at home and the school didn't step up and do something about it. We have programs for that. So don't get caught up in the emotional attack of that. So these skills here that they say they have to teach your children are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Again, that sounds really nice. Who doesn't want their kids to have these skills, right? But when I was talking about the lens, the critical race theory lens, that is the viewpoint that they're pushing these skills onto your children. It is all through the lens of equity. Equity lens is a critical race theorist lens. It's the way they view the world, that they want equity. So when you have an SEL program, they will talk about these competencies, but they may not call it competencies. I like to push a lot on the language here because people will go to their school and they'll say, well, that was really interesting, Jennifer, but I don't see any of that at my school. Well, at my school, we didn't call them skills. We didn't call them competencies. At my school, we called them habits. So this language that is all over the place is very confusing to people because they think it's not in their school, but it is. So you have to be careful about that. But the habits were these competencies right here. All of these competencies will be taught in every grade, K through 12. But there is a heavy focus. So you have to, when you have children coming to school that believe in a general sense, how we were all brought up, and we teach our children and generation after generation, right, about the world. So you have to be pretty fancy and pretty intricate to manipulate an entire generation of children to shift their lens, their perception. And what you will find in the lower grades of SEL schools is, and through these SEL programs, is a very heavy emphasis on the self-awareness and self-management skills. And that is because that identity wheel that I talked about and the hierarchy that they believe we all sit on, the first thing you have to do is get these children to realize where they sit on that hierarchy and what their identities are. And so if you're watching the news or anything, or social media, you see a lot of talk out there about the books, the gender identity books, the sexuality preference books that are influencing children. And that's because they're trying to get them to figure out where they fall, who they are, what are their identities, and what is their role in this hierarchy. They don't explain it to them like that. This is literally a 12-year brainwashing program. Okay, so they just influence them that this is normal, and everybody has an identity, and it's so important. And once you get children to understand what their identity is and where they fall on the hierarchy of oppressed and oppressors, you then move these children around towards responsible decision making. I want my child to make responsible decisions, but I'm not teaching her to make responsible decisions based on if she's an oppressor or oppressed. But that's what they mean by responsible decision making. That you are to start making your decisions based on if you are an oppressor or you are an oppressed, for equity. Once you get children making decisions based on their identity, then you start to move them around. You will see a heavier focus on this in the higher grades, to relationship skills and social awareness. This is where they activate the social justice camps, is what I would call them. They're teaching them to be social justice warriors. They teach them that now it is your role to go into the community and do something about these inequitable systems. This is absolutely a brainwashing program. It started in the classrooms and schools. The rings on the outside moved from the inside out to family caregivers and communities. When I was trying in 2019 to sound the alarm on this, it's because I was on the inside watching this transformation. But everybody's like, this woman's crazy, right? What is she talking about? And I could understand that, but I just kept on and kept on but now people are seeing it. And that's because our education system it's fully saturated. So we've moved past the classroom in schools. We are now into where the families and communities. And literally, SEL is not just for the children, it's for everyone. If you watch, I still do the professional development, all of those things, so I can keep up on everything. Heavy focus right now on SEL is adult SEL. And the reason is because now they're going to say, well, if you want to help your children, you need to use the same language, right? You need to do that. So they're going to train the adults, then get them to start using this with the children. It is an entire transformation of the belief system of our country. On CASEL's website, again, like I said, you have to listen to what they're saying. Students, families, schools, and communities are all part of broader systems that shape learning, development, and experiences. Inequities based on race, ethnicity, class, language, gender, identity, sexual orientation, and other factors are deeply ingrained in the vast majority of these systems and impact students and adult social, emotional, and academic learning. They're telling you, we're using that identity wheel, we're manipulating your children, we're going to dismantle these systems. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I do want to get to as much as I can today, but social emotional learning, there's two parts to it, okay? There is a part that is called emotional intelligence, which makes sense. It's literally social emotional learning. Emotional intelligence was made popular, I think in '95, by Daniel Goleman. He wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. Okay? And in this book, he talks about emotional literacy programs improve children's academic achievement scores, school performance, and life achievements. That's what CASEL says. He says that teachers must go beyond their traditional mission and that people in the community become more involved with schools. Teachers must go beyond their traditional mission. The government must start raising your children. That's what they mean. People in the community become more involved with schools. Collectivism. Okay, those two statements from his book. Daniel Goleman is one of the three co-founders of CASEL, of social emotional learning. Emotional intelligence, there's a lot of controversy out there about this, but I'm going to give you just a couple points. I see some people are writing stuff down, so I would suggest looking into this. There's a lot to it, but I'm just going to give you a couple points that I think are good to know. And when he came out with this, there was no evidence to back up what he was saying. It's completely fraudulent. So the entire social emotional learning idea of emotional intelligence, there's no such thing as an emotional intelligence because you cannot measure it. That doesn't mean that we don't have different emotional ways and needs and that we have to manage those. Of course we do. But to call emotional intelligence something in the realm that he's calling it, it is a fraud, it is not true, and they have no way to measure it like they say. But yet we're transforming our entire education system around it. In 2010, Harms and Creed showed a significant contribution for emotional intelligence in the prediction of performance. Sorry, Jody. Okay, so this was a new slide that I added in, so I left off some of that. So they went over the only amount of studies that they had that would show any kind of impact of a type of program like this is what they did. And they found that it did not increase their achievement in any area that they said. Okay, none. And in fact, when they used, and at the time he called it emotional literacy, he then changed it to emotional intelligence. Now it's social emotional learning. But they have done studies, and there's been some come out recently. I think it's going to be interesting because there are people out there now, because of this transformation of our education system, that are digging in and actually doing scientific research on it. And what's happening is when you focus emotions in the way that they do, and you put emotions, of course they're important, but as the predictor of your success in life, what you do is you have children who really feel, right? We all have different personalities. Some are more empathetic than others. And the children that are very empathetic and very vulnerable to this, they end up being silenced even more. Because when they do have a thought of their own and they want to speak up, they don't want to because now they're afraid they're going to hurt someone's feelings. Okay? Then you have the children that they claim to help, which are, of course, children are a little bit unruly, right? I mean, it happens, it's right? Like, so you have children with a little bit stronger personality, maybe not as empathetic. And what happens to those children when they go through things like this is they learn to become more manipulative. It quite literally does the opposite of what it says it's going to do. So I'll have to fix that slide there, but I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. I really like him. He has a big thing out there on this. So I pulled him because he's widely known. He literally says there is no such thing as an EQ. Scientifically, it's a fraudulent concept, a fad, a convenient bandwagon, and a corporate marketing scheme. And he has videos out, and he explains it. I can't explain it like him. I'll let him do it, but look it up. He explains exactly why there is no way they can measure it. It's not a thing. But what it is that on the personality wheel, what they're doing is they are, I'd have to think, you have openness, neuroticism, agreeableness. There's 5 big personality traits, and we all have, a percentage on somewhere. This emotional intelligence is focused in on agreeableness, 1 personality trait. Now they're going to focus these children on to be agreeable, right? And that's it. They don't talk about being they don't talk about being open to ideas. They don't talk about standing up for yourself. They don't talk about any of that. It's all about, I used to always say compromise, but it's really the agreeableness personality that they are pushing. And then I talked about that it teaches manipulation. So that is something I would certainly look into, especially if you're fighting it, because you will be able to come up with statistics that literally disprove what they're saying about it. Culturally responsive teaching is the other part of social emotional learning. Culturally responsive teaching, you will hear a ton about the culture in social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is a full school culture shift to educate the whole child. That means that if your child goes to school with SEL, they're not just getting an SEL lesson. This is to infiltrate every single aspect of your child's day. So I tell people, yes, try to opt them out of the SEL lessons. At least it's something. You'll never get them away from it completely because it is supposed to be embedded within the culture of the school until you just fight it and get it out. But culturally responsive teaching states that students must develop a broader socio-political consciousness that allows them to critique the cultural norms, values, mores, and institutions that produce and maintain social inequities. Culturally responsive teaching was coined by critical race theorist Gloria Ladson-Billings. Back in '95, she had 2 peer-reviewed journals out. The first one was toward a critical race theory of education. The second one was towards a culturally relevant pedagogy of, I think it says, of education. But so she basically, and she wrote a book called The Dream Keepers, and it's about how our country is systemically racist and oppressive, and how in order to change that, you have to get the minds of the children. Does that sound like someone from Germany, maybe? And you have to get them to understand that they live in a systemically oppressive country, and then you teach them to become warriors and agents of change. And that is where culturally responsive teaching comes from. Castle, they have on their website that social emotional learning is transformative. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to, this first sentence. So transformative SEL is to reflect our interest in making explicit issues such as power, privilege, prejudice, discrimination, social justice, empowerment, and self-determination in the field of SEL. It goes on. It's extremely offensive. So go to Castle's website. It's castle.org. Type in transformative social emotional learning, and you're going to find out a lot of information and what they're doing to our schools right now. But it is all based on critical race theory. So, but I always suggest to people, you go to the schools, stop asking about critical race theory. They're playing a game with you. They've been given talking points, and they've said, do not tell the parents we're doing critical race theory. What they can't deny is that what they're doing is culturally responsive teaching, the other CRT. Okay? Use their language and don't let them out of it. Hold them accountable. Who is behind SEL? This is just a few, but the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Fetzer Institute, this is where it was actually started, the Fetzer Institute, and it is this very new age, spirituality, global, one world organization. That is where SEL, the term, was coined. That is where the Castle organization came out of, Fetzer Institute. And just a little side note, John Fetzer was a follower of Alice Bailey, a huge follower of Alice Bailey, who was the creator of the Luciferian Publishing Company. Southern Poverty Law Center, don't know them. They're very, very radical and destructive. UNESCO, National Equity Project, which is also, I heard someone mention Second Steps, so if you have Second Steps here, they are partnered with Second Steps, the World Economic Forum, Planned Parenthood, and of course the Teachers Union. Those are just a few, but that's who's running this and supporting it and funding it. Okay, how does the data collection work? The data is the social emotional learning bloodline. So every state in our country has what's called a statewide longitudinal data system. They are in the works of updating all of these systems right now, but your children all have a profile within these systems. And before social emotional learning, there was data in there based on academics and things like that. But now that we have social emotional learning, they're working very hard to update all of these systems. They will connect nationwide, eventually globally. I've seen paperwork on that. And the social emotional data that they're collecting on your children, which is psycho analysis, profiling of your children, will be in these databases. It's already there, so that your children are getting SEL scores, okay, based on the data they're collecting on these children. If you do nothing else, I hope you do a lot, but if you do nothing else when you walk out of here today, you opt your children out of those surveys, you tell everyone you know to opt out of those surveys, and don't trust that they're going to keep your children opt out of the surveys. You have to continuously check on it, continuously, because I hear time and time again, I opted them out and they still gave it to my child, okay? And if that happens, call your attorney general and sue them. So SLDS is defined as a data system with formal connections across 2 or more of the 4 core agencies: early learning, K-12, post-secondary, and workforce. But eventually it will have all of them. It's just that right now they're trying to update them with all of these systems. Social emotional learning skills, here's another word you should be on the watch for. It was always meant to be this, but it is aligning for the workforce. They are transitioning social emotional learning to be called employability skills, okay, or workability. I've seen that as well. So the reason they're doing this is because all of this data is getting fed into this data system. Your children will be scored based on the data that's collected, and that will determine how employable they are in an equitable world. If I sound crazy, you wouldn't be the first to tell me that, but I am telling you the absolute truth. I put nothing in my presentations that I can't back up, 100%. That's what they're doing. It aligns right now with the World Economic Forum. If you follow any of that, I'm not going to go into it, and the ESG scores that businesses are taking on. Our children are in massive danger. So at least at this very moment, get them out of that data and tell everyone you know. If we cut the bloodline, then they don't care about the emotional needs of your children, believe me. They want the data because they can control them. Okay, Panorama is one of the organizations that is behind collecting the data, funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, partnered with Castle. One of the main ways that they do this is through surveys that they give children that I just said to opt out of. And if you go to your school and ask to see these surveys, and they let you see them, the questions do not seem like a big deal. They don't seem like dangerous, and the school will say, it's just so that we can know how it's going in our school and we can make improvements. They give your children these surveys, and they send out the data. This data is interpreted through what's called an equity lens, okay? Right on the website. It's called an equity lens. And what that means is they don't interpret the data like you and I do, okay? They interpret the data, and really with data, you can get whatever results you want. You just have to interpret the data to get it. So a critical race theorist, or through that equitable lens, sees every single situation as oppressive in some way. It doesn't matter if you think you can't find any way that a situation could be possibly oppressive, they'll find a way. And that's the lens that they're interpreting the data through. So I'll give you an example. If it asks, how a child, again, asking subjective questions, I think about my now 8-year-old taking a survey like this. I'm like, she couldn't answer this honestly or even understand the scope of some of these questions, but yet that data would be attached to her in a system for our government to use. So if a question would be like, how often do you understand the lessons on a weekly basis in class? Okay? And some parents would be like, well, okay, don't you want to know if they understand it? Well, if you're a good teacher, you know if they understand it or not. Okay? You don't need a survey interpreted through an equity lens on a third-party organization to tell you that. So the data goes out, comes back in, the administrators say they came to me and said, Jennifer, 25% of your students don't feel like they understand the lessons on a weekly basis. Well, I would think I've got to do something different, right? I need to change something, obviously. That is not how they interpret this data. They interpret this data as 25% of your students don't understand because there's something wrong with the system, so we need to change the system. So it's not the teacher's fault, she's not reaching the children, it's the system. So in comes more equitable initiatives to your school. And this is a cycle. I can't remember if I put the next, I bet I didn't. So I have a graphic, and it shows the cycle of this. So it's give the students surveys, interpret the data, you do actionable results from the data, which is always through the equity lens, and then you implement it, and then back to the surveys, because the actionable data will always call for more social emotional learning. It will always point out that there is a problem in your school that is not equitable, and now you need to do this. So then you do this, then you take the survey to see if it's better, then you send it back out, then it comes back in. Now you're not equitable over here. So now it's a cycle, and they won't stop until there's no stopping this, right? Until they have produce the generation of children that they want that will dismantle this country and give up their own rights freely. Okay, I've got about 10 minutes. So, all right, if you have not, another aspect of social emotional learning is the counseling services. This is a huge part of social emotional learning. That's why they call it a mental health initiative. So, the American School Counseling Association puts out a counseling model and guidelines, and they are the national model. And there are some other ones out there, but they are to parallel the American School Counseling Association, and so this is a huge driver of the counseling services in the schools. Trish Hatch of Hatching Results is behind creating the model for the counselors for the American School Counseling Association. I just call it ASCA. And she is quoted as saying, in their new role, school counselors are now defining themselves as social justice advocates capable of transforming the educational and social disparities youth face. The counselors are social justice advocates. That's political. That's ideological. She has a book out called Pilots, Passengers, Prisoners, and Hijackers. This is where she describes the school system. She was one of Obama's education consultants, surprise, surprise. But the book, Pilots, Passengers, and Prisoners, and Hijacks. Pilots are the people in the school that are the social justice warriors, right? They're driving the plane, flying the plane. The passengers are the teachers that are like, this is great, right? And they're just taking it in and feeding it to their children. We have a lot of prisoners in our schools, according to her, because the prisoners are the teachers that are afraid to speak out. The prisoners in the school are the ones that are afraid they're going to lose their job. I wouldn't know why. The prisoners are the ones that don't want to do this, but they're just doing enough what they have to, and they're trying to get to the academics. But every time this data comes through the school, they have to do more and more of this social justice activism. And then the hijackers, I would be a hijacker in the school because those are the ones that she talks about getting rid of. And that's how she explains it. That's exactly how she explains it. Okay, so their position statements, if you're looking up things, I would suggest going to their website and looking up their position statements. It's super eye-opening. So the counselors are going through this training, and through their ethical agreement are supposed to uphold these ideas with these children that come in for counseling. Now here's something about SEL. Social emotional learning is a trauma-informed program. And so when you use the reason for this, now again, if you think back in the beginning, what I was saying is we've always had children come to school that have had legitimate, true trauma, but we had interventions and services for them. Those kids weren't left out. We did a lot for those kids, whatever we could. Schools would bend over for them, right? So why do we have to bring in a trauma-informed program for all of the children? Because if your child's in an SEL school, they are all now deemed traumatized. And what's behind that is because they live in a systemically oppressive and racist country, so they're traumatized. They believe all of you are. They believe I am, right? That I'm traumatized. I just don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm standing up here talking to you because I'm just a product of the systematically oppressive country. So all of your children now are in what's called Tier 1 interventions, where we used to have Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 interventions for children that legitimately need that. It may be behavioral and it may be academic, but it was only for children that were identified as needing that. But now all of the children get Tier 1 intervention based on social emotional learning because it's trauma-informed. And so therefore, the school counselors now are responsible to treat all of the children that are traumatized in Tier 1. I'll bet a lot of parents didn't know that. Your child's been placed into Tier 1 intervention. Okay, their position statements is everything you can think of, right? Systemic change agents, anti-racist practices. On the confidentiality, this is when you were talking about how schools are telling children, you don't have to tell your parents everything. I am now involved in 2 cases, and I know this is happening everywhere, but in my own state, where a child has went to their school counselor and said, I'm a girl, but I believe I am a boy, and my family doesn't support that. They're trying to convince me that's not true. When you see confidentiality from a school counselor, right? You think, okay, of course they're not out saying everything, but you as a parent assume you are contact number one, right? If there's a problem with your child, you assume that that school is going to let you know. It is not like that anymore. They can start a file on you. This has happened. And basically, instead of saying, okay, this child needs some help, I'm going to obviously reach out to the parents and see what they want to do. They now say, well, this child's being neglected at home because they are not being affirmed in their homes. And I know of cases where the schools then have taken that information and fought at court to get the child taken away from the parents. I know if that situation happens, then the school counselors through ASCA are told to go ahead and affirm the child within the school system and hide it from the parents. They will have a meeting with the teachers. Obviously, I can't give specifics, but I'm telling you this is what they're doing, and I know, like I said, 2 cases that are going to court over this. But the counselors will go to the teachers and say, look, you know, I don't know, whatever. Sally thinks she's Bob, and so we're going to call her Bob, and we're going to let her use the right restroom, but when you talk to the parents, you need to use the legal information and name to the parents so they don't know, because we believe the parents are neglecting this child. So everything that you thought about the education system is now backwards, because that should never happen. Never. And so I tell people, I would tell that school, do not allow my child to have any service at all from the school counselor. If there is a problem, you will call me. I will seek outside sources, because there is an agenda with these counselors. And I'm not saying all individual counselors are bad. Then I have people that will want to push back and say, my friend's not like that, and she's a school counselor. I understand that they don't all have that agenda, but they're all being trained, and they all have the responsibility through these systems to do things like this. And all it takes is the door to be open. And this is the multi-tiered system of supports I was talking about. So like I said, tier 2 is for small group interventions based on what they may need. And I will have people say, well, my child gets, I like SEL because she gets help with reading. She's in reading groups. And I tell them, I'm like, we already had that intervention, right? We already did that. So always ask yourself, what is it that we weren't doing before? Well, we were not manipulating children and placing them all to be living in a systemically oppressive country based on social justice is what we were not doing before SEL. So I know I'm about out of time. Can I do just a couple examples? I want to give you sorry, I'll go quickly, but I do want to give you a couple examples here. It's just that it's such a big, I'll go quickly. But they talked about this. So SEL uses literally brainwashing techniques: propaganda, role-playing, self-criticism, isolation, repetitive phrases, us versus them, and love bombing. You can look more into that, but that's what they're doing. In order to make your schools more equitable, you will have more of these clubs. So the GSA clubs, which believe that gender is a spectrum. Okay? When he was talking, I think maybe it was John was talking about that, you know, maybe it was, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. So, but that children, it was their right to not tell their parents everything, right? They're calling that, it's human rights. Human rights. So when you hear that, that should trigger your mind. We're creating victims. By placing all the children in tier 1, they also get interventions. So we have places in our schools, they will call them different things: mindful corners. At my school, they were cooling stations based on cooling the amygdala, right? They have the Zen Den is at one of our schools in Indiana. The language will be all over the place, but basically the idea is, if you feel like you need a break, you get to just go take it. Well, the older kids in some of our schools are figuring this out. It's like, at lunch, it's like, hey, like, you know, 5th, 6th grade, it's like, hey, I don't want to do that math test. And then I don't either. Well, I'll meet you down in the Zen Den, right? I mean, how ridiculous have we become? But we are creating victims, and we're teaching them that the savior is their government. The obscenity, the books in the schools. again, I'm going very fast, but at the younger grades, you're going to have the books that I was talking about, those first competencies focusing on their identities. They, she, he, easy as ABC, my princess boy, a different dragon, Heather has two mommies, a tale of two daddies. I put the different dragon on there because you not recognize that that was about gender ideology. So I encourage you to always look through the books, always. You wouldn't know it. Obviously, this is not obscenity, but this is part of the manipulation they make normal to normalize it. Once you get to the higher grades, you will have books like these. The two in the middle, stamped by Ibram Kendi's, very popular right now. The Hate You Give. These use that counter storytelling to manipulate children to listen to the perceptions of stories that have been oppressed. Exit Here is a book that we have found in Indiana. If you gave that book to a child on the street, you would be arrested and charged with a felony. But the schools get to do it under the guise of education. And it is through an obscenity loophole. And so it's hard for me to keep up with all the states, but I know 43 states have it. So I'm not sure if Ohio has it, but they will. Okay, so they're going to allow your children to check this stuff out. And now you may be thinking, oh, that's horrible, but surely there's only like 1 or 2 books. No, they're flooding the libraries with this stuff. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen on Facebook. I'm not doing it anymore because it started to spread, but I had started a Facebook page back when I was fighting this in Indiana called Mary in the Library. And we started exposing these books out of the library. And so now there's a lot of Mary in the libraries in other states, and you can look those up, but it's a good place to start looking for some of these books and find them in your library. Learning for Justice is the website from the Southern Poverty Law Center. It used to be called Teaching Tolerance, but it is now Learning for Justice. It's one of the biggest SEL resources for that they use. And it, again, it's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. I highly recommend you go to their website. This is an example of a lesson. Doesn't mean your school's using it, but from Welcoming Schools in order to teach very young children about non-binary. And you could use this, see, it's supposed to be integrated into all of the academics. So you could talk about one day in science, butterflies, right? But then you can just slide this in and say, here's a female butterfly, here's a male butterfly, and then show them what a non-binary butterfly looks like. This lesson actually comes with a blank butterfly, and you let the little children, it's for kindergarten through 2nd grade, go back to their desk and design what kind of butterfly they feel like that day. This is a genderbread person. It's pretty popular. You get circled around a lot, but this is what they do, to teach children, very young children, about identity, attraction, and expression. What can you do? I know they already said some of those things, so I'm not going to. I'm going over my time a little bit, so I don't want to. But I am going to give you this last thing here. If you go to, this is a trusted resource that has just come out. I can tell you I fully trust. I know that it's trustable. Go to courageasahabit.org, and you will get an amazing PDF with 10 questions that will help you start the conversation at your school, and you can pass around to people. I also recommend sharing this because there will be a lot more information coming out to help parents. So it's courageasahabit.org. And that's all I got. So if you follow me on Twitter, that would be awesome, and I really appreciate your time. Sorry I went over just a little bit there.
For a few minutes,
Yeah.
any questions?
Yeah.
Excellent. If you don't mind, I'll sit and ask your questions.
Sure.
Thank you, John. Okay, lots of feedback, many fantastic questions. We won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll get through as many as we can. Would you be open maybe after both panel discussions to answering some of these questions
Sure.
if we have extra time at the end? Okay, excellent. So the first question comes from, it looks like Julie Stedman, who is a new school board member. Is the data collection survey process mandated by Ohio or the federal government or tied to specific funding to schools? And will my principals say we have to do this?
So I cannot, I'm traveling all over, so I can't answer specifically for Ohio. I'm sorry about that. But as far as these surveys being mandated, They're not, unless it's specific to your state. But what will happen is that a lot of these SEL programs are getting started in schools with grants. And the grant money, whoever wants the grant is requiring the data collection. So you kind of have to look at, right, it's not going to be mandated through the law, but based on how your school brought the program in, it may be mandated, it may be required there.
So on the issue of surveys, is this Panorama survey the same used for teacher and staff surveys? And if yes, what data is obtained from the, quote, anonymous answers?
So it is. They will use the same. Panorama will provide for parents and staff and children surveys, and it's the same. It's the beliefs they score. They're kind of I know, shocking, secretive about all of it. It's very difficult to get all the information, but they're scoring you, psychoanalyzing you, as whether you're a teacher, student, or a parent, based on your beliefs of agreeableness, okay, compromise, where you stand on that, do you fit in, and so they score it based on that.
This question reads, I have asked multiple times how my school administrators define equity versus equality. No one will define it. Can you give a definition of equity in their terms, in SEL terms?
Yeah, they will say that they need equity because that means that every child will get what they need to learn, is what they'll tell you. But that's not, equity obviously is equal outcomes. And so they believe in this dominant white supremacist culture. And so the children that are doing well within the school then will stop getting, okay, for example, they will have advanced classes, right? Well, we're already seeing this in California, Washington, they're getting rid of those classes. And it just blows my mind. I'm like, that doesn't mean those classes are full of white people, right? That's crazy. And in fact, if you really want to fight their statistics, Asian children score higher across the board. But they're not they're not being accounted for, except for out in Loudoun County, they're fighting back. But everything that they say is just about taking from who they believe is the oppressor and giving to those who that they believe are oppressed. Yeah.
So one quick story. I remember the first time that I saw that show up. I think it came in the form of a math question, and it went something like, if there are 20 apples in 4 bags, how many apples would be in each bag if the apples were distributed in equity instead of equally? And so it was lacing the math question with the term equity.
Right.
How many teachers actually buy into social emotional learning?
When I was down in the line, I think a lot more. I was like, don't you see? But if I had to guess, I would say it's probably about 50-50, honestly. And one of the problems with it is that if, say you're a 3rd grade teacher, right? And your agenda is not what I'm talking about. It's not your agenda. You're just like, well, I just have to do what the school tells me to do, and I'm trying to teach academics, right? You're still participating in part of the process. And if you're a 3rd grade teacher and you're only doing what they're making you do, you're really only 25% of the brainwashing for that year, because it is a culture shift, so the kids are getting it everywhere. It's not just what the teacher is giving them. So I don't know but teachers, they really need to step outside of where they're at and their role is and look at the whole system of it.
Do you think that they're aware of what's happening in the present and what the long-term impact of that is, based on your travels and your communications with different groups around the country? Speaking of teachers.
Yeah, teachers specifically. I think a lot of the older teachers do. I think they're very concerned, but they're like, what am I supposed to do about it at this point? And it's pouring, they're right, it is in the universities, obviously it's pouring in from teachers that are graduating.
To your comment earlier that it's coming in from everywhere, I did get a statement, and it reads, my employer has been doing the EQ for 10 years. To apply to my employer, you have to take a quiz questionnaire that surveys your SEL/EQ. We have our own diversity and inclusion department. My employer is the Cleveland Clinic. SEL is everywhere.
It is, yes, it is, and that's part of that community on the outside. That also would get them a high ESG score.
Yes, you talked about that.
Yes.
And that's rewarded.
That is rewarded. So eventually, the idea behind all of this is that we'll all be hooked into it. So if you're a business, you will have to have the higher your ESG score, which would be based on stuff like that, the more business you get, the higher your personal, it's like a social credit score, right? But your personal score, the more employable you are. And that's, you think China is what we're doing.
Right. So the social score essentially is
Yes.
where we're headed.
Yes, but it is a global initiative. I should say that. This is. I think I saw a number the other day. There's 110 countries now doing this.
So I think the question that I see on everyone's face in the audience is, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a more direct question, are there groups locally, statewide, regionally, that folks can plug into to gain more education and information and make a bigger difference?
Mm-hmm. So I know they talked about it a little. I think we have to come from many angles, right? That's how it got in there, so we're going to have to fight at many angles. Education is still key. I still find so many people that just don't know. They just see a lesson online and they think it's just a lesson. They don't understand that umbrella that I showed. And so if you have information you've learned here, I hope you do, you've got to start spreading it. We have to, social emotional learning is a violation of the Civil Rights Act, and it is also a violation of our First Amendment. It is hard to find attorneys right now they see it, but they're like, well, I need something concrete. So you pay attention to everything your school is putting out. If they're telling your children they have to call other children by their, use certain language, you call a First Amendment attorney, that's compelled speech. We have to fight out back at the legal level as well. And then you have to, as much as some people may not want to, get involved with politics. And that doesn't mean you have to run, but if some people have got to run, people have to support those that are running, and people have to have a voice. And I think our side for so long has not had a voice. They hear from the teachers union, they make one email and they have 6,000 calls, and that's all they hear from. We have to start to organize and really have a voice. So you have to fight it at every level.
Excellent. Jennifer, thank you for your time.
Thank you.